For most of history, a kitchen like this had no cold box in the corner. The eggs sat in a bowl, the butter in a crock, the onions on a nail, and every one of them kept just fine. For thousands of years, people kept food without a refrigerator at all. The house itself did the cooling. A cellar, a cool pantry, a crock of salt, and it worked because they understood exactly why each food kept. This is the record of 20 foods your great-grandparents kept out of the cold on purpose, and the plain reason each one never needed it. The Amish still keep most of them this way today. One thing first. This is the record of how it was done and why it worked, not a set of instructions for your kitchen. Old home practice is not the same as modern food safety advice. We are here for the how and the why. Number 1, potatoes. They asked for 3 simple things: complete darkness, steady air, and to be kept as cold as possible without ever touching frost, which rots them through. When there were sacks of them, farmers built a clamp, a steep mound of potatoes under straw and soil, with little straw chimneys for air. The cool of the earth held them steady straight through winter. Number 2, carrots. The trick was to never wash them. A rinse before storing rots them completely. Laid down in boxes of dry sand just above freezing, they stayed crisp for months. The sand did 2 jobs at once. It held just enough moisture that the roots would not shrivel, and it walled them off from the open air that dries and softens them. Washed first, though, and they were finished. Number 3, beets. The tops were wrung off rather than cut, so the roots would not bleed, then laid gently in moist sand without letting a single one touch its neighbor. Like that, they held for months. Number 4, cabbage. It stood hard frost down to about 20 degrees on its own. Below that, whole heads went into a shed or straight into a hole dug in the ground and came out hard and sweet in the spring. Number 5, onions. These broke the rule the roots followed. They wanted it dry, not damp. Cured in the sun until the skins rustled, braided, and hung in a cool, airy place, well out of the wet cellar. Leave them the least bit damp, or store them with the necks still soft, and a gray mold sets in and rots them from the top down. That is why the rule was always sun-dried skins first, then a dry, airy corner. Number 6, winter squash and pumpkins. These wanted it warmer than anything else in the house, around 50 to 60 degrees, dry and airy, with the stem left on. A good hard rind carried them for months. Put down in the damp cellar beside the roots, squash simply rots. It wants the opposite corner of the house, dry, airy, a touch warmer, with a few inches of stem left on to seal the wound where it was cut from the vine. Number 7, apples. Each laid apple was wrapped alone in paper and laid in a cold, dark room near freezing, and kept far away from the potatoes, because ripening apples give off a gas that makes potatoes sprout. This is exactly where the old saying comes from: one bad apple really does spoil the barrel. So the good ones were looked over often, and any that had begun to turn were pulled before they took the rest down with them. The cellar handled the harvest from the garden. But meat, milk, and fat needed something stronger than the cold of the earth. They needed salt, smoke, and a good seal against the open air. Number 8, cured ham and bacon. Salt was the whole secret. It draws the water out of the meat and stops decay at the same time. Packed on heavy over anywhere from 10 to 90 days depending on the cut. Cured hard and smoked slow, a country ham could hang in a cool room for years and only get better. Some famous Virginia hams were kept so long that one went from a girl's christening all the way to her wedding day. Number 9, meat kept under fat. Cooked poultry was packed into a crock and sealed beneath a lid of lard or butter, and it sat for months because the fat locks out the air, and it is the air that lets meat spoil. Number 10, butter. Worked with a little salt and packed hard into a scalded crock under a layer of salt and paper, it kept for months on a cool shelf. Unsalted butter, the old dairymaids knew, spoils fast. Number 11, hard cheese. Pressed, salted, and sealed in wax. It was built to age slowly at around 55 to 60 degrees, a cellar shelf, whereas the old cheesemakers warned, a refrigerator is actually too cold. The harder and older it grew, the better it kept, a good cheddar only improving for 6 months or more. One wheel dug out of the Siberian ground was said to be 2,000 years old and still holding together. Number 12. Salt beans. Green beans were laid down in a crock in layers with salt, a pound of salt to every 3 of beans, until they sat drowned in their own brine, keeping right through to spring. Salt and smoke saved the meat. For the garden's overflow, the old kitchen reached for 3 more tools that need no cold at all: sourness, sweetness, and plain dry air. Number 13. Pickles. Vinegar strong enough, around 4 to 6% acid, turns a jar into a place where the bacteria that spoil food simply cannot grow. A sealed crock of them held a full year in the pantry. And because the acid does the guarding, pickles were among the safest things to put up. No special equipment was needed, just a good strong vinegar and a clean sealed jar standing quiet in the pantry through the whole winter. Number 14. Sauerkraut. Salt draws the juice out of shredded cabbage, and the right bacteria turn its sugars into sour lactic acid. The whole thing works on the counter at room temperature, no cold required. The cabbage had to stay pressed down under its own brine, sealed away from the air, or it browned and spoiled. Held under, it soured slowly over a few weeks into something that kept the rest of the year. Number 15. Jam and preserves. Sugar does for fruit what salt does for meat. Packed in thick enough, it ties up the water so nothing can grow in it. A properly sealed jar keeps a year on the shelf. The old jams were far sweeter than ours for a plain reason. The sugar was not there just for flavor, it was the preservative. Too little and it would mold, enough of it, and the jar stayed good long past the growing season. Number 16. Dried beans, fruit, and jerky. Pull 4/5 of the water out of a food and the spoilage simply stops for want of moisture. Dried beans keep for years in a crock, and dried meat for months on end. Sun and moving air did the whole job for free. Once the water was gone, there was simply nothing left for mold or rot to live on, and what remained was light, small, and good on a shelf for a very long time. Number 17. Whole grain. A kernel of wheat keeps for years in a cool, dry bin, but the moment you grind it into flour, the oil locked inside is opened up to the air, and that is when it slowly turns rancid. Those were the foods the old kitchen worked to keep, but there is a shorter list at the back of the almanac. Foods we drop into the cold today that were never meant to be there in the first place. Number 18. Honey. It has fed people for more than 10,000 years, and it keeps almost forever, sealed in a clean jar at room temperature. Around 75 degrees, it barely changes at all. The cold is the one thing honey does not want. Chilled, it turns hard and grainy, but that is not spoiling, only crystals, and a jar set in warm water runs clear again. One caution though, never give honey to a baby under a year old. Number 19. Eggs. Fresh from the hen, an egg wears a natural coat that seals the pores of its shell, so it was never washed, and it simply sat in a bowl on the counter, good for weeks. To hold them for months, cooks buried eggs small end down in ash, salt, or bran, and turned them over once a week. It is the very same idea behind the water glass jars we wrote about in an earlier page of the almanac. Number 20. Tomatoes. Picked green before the frost. They were set out on a shelf a few inches apart to ripen slowly on their own. And the one place a ripe tomato was never put, not then, not by anyone who grew them, was the cold. On the warm windowsill they ripened, sweet and full over a week or two, and there they simply stayed until they were eaten. The cold box was the one place a good homegrown tomato was never meant to sit. None of this was magic, and none of it was luck. It was a whole kitchen built to keep food without a cold box. Salt, sugar, sour, dry air, and the plain steady cool of the earth, each one matched to the food it saved. The refrigerator did not make our food safe. It just made us forget the systems that already did the job. This isn't a trick, and it isn't nostalgia. It's the record, documented, and it still works. That's one more page from the almanac. Subscribe. There is a lot that we forgot, and one by one, I'm writing it all back down.